Hello, everybody. The sun is shining over Australia. I actually checked. It's a beautiful day in Sydney with a slight breeze from the northwest. However, figuratively speaking, the outlook and the potential for solar PV in Australia has never been brighter. So please allow me to introduce today's and to welcome you today's Downstream Market Briefing 2021 for Australia. My name is Saif Islam. I am the Senior Consultant at EUPD Research, and I will be your host for today's session, filled with insightful presentations from some of the global leaders in the Australian PV market. Welcome to Solar and Storage DigiCon, brought to you by Joint Forces for Solar and IBESA. Please keep in mind, you can download all of today's presentations via the DigiCon booths, and you can get in touch individually with all of our speakers. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and my team and enjoy today's show. So as I mentioned, we're going to have various presentations today about solar PV, energy storage, electric mobility, and further topics regarding the energy transition. Let's get started though, straight away, because we do not have a lot of time and we do have a lot of information to bring you today. So first of all, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my esteemed colleague, Davide Pizenti. Davide joined EUPD Research in 2019 as a research consultant and has been responsible for various consulting projects throughout his, until now, brief period, and has taken more and more action now in regards to creating his own presentations, his own research projects, and his sales activities. He will now present the PV market outlook for Australia 2021. Davide, welcome to the show and enjoy yourself.
So good evening, everybody, and thank you very much, Sai, for your kind introduction. My name is Davide Pizenti, and I joined EUPD Research as a research consultant in 2019. And I'm very happy to have the chance to kick off today's conference with some fresh market data on the Australian PV market. I will open my presentation now. Okay. Today, I would like to present you some market data on the development of the PV market in Australia. And first of all, I would like to briefly introduce EUPD Research. We are a market research and consulting company. We're based in Bonn, in Germany, and we have been analyzing global energy markets for 20 years. Our expertise covers three main areas. So we are active in market research, we provide a certification service, and we also do exclusive consulting projects. Later on, my colleague Saif is going to focus on some results from our market research and certifications area. Therefore, today, I'm going to focus on one of the other areas, which is basically consulting, but we are going to work at intersection between research and consulting. In fact, I'm going to present you some market data and some of our analysis. In fact, we also carry out exclusive projects which are tailored to the need of our clients. So we help clients identifying where can they identify the highest potential for their business in the solar industry, in which countries and under which conditions they could successfully develop their business. We also help companies entering new markets, and we analyze the framework conditions which characterize each of the markets. On top of that, we also work in close cooperation with stakeholders and customers and installer in each market. And also from this perspective, we can provide you with valuable insights. Here we have a list with some of our clients, with some of the companies who have been cooperating in the last years. And as you can see, we are in cooperation with some of the main industry players. So we analyze global energy markets. We've been doing that for 20 years, and therefore we decided to systematically keep track of the development in the solar PV market with one comprehensive tool. This is the reason why we decided to launch our Global Energy Transition Matrix, which is an online tool which delivers insights on the global PV market, so at a global level, but specifically focusing on each country, which is included in the matrix. The tool can be accessed 24/7, each day of the year, and it can be accessed through a dedicated account. The main benefit of this tool is to have continuously access to highly precise data delivered by a UPD research, which are being updated continuously. So generally speaking, we keep track of three main areas. We keep track of economic development, technological development, and solar PV market, and also of regulation and framework conditions. This is the reason why the parameters which are being tracked with our tool can be categorized in 5 main classes. So we have highly precise data on solar PV installations. We also provide detailed data about the electricity market, and we also focus deeply on economic and political parameters, so regulation, which shapes the potential of development in each of the single country included in the matrix. On top of that, we also include specific information on the stakeholders which are active in each market, and we top up our tool including continuously news which are relevant for each of the market. If you're interested in having a look at our tool, you should get in touch, and we can also activate an account for you so you can have a hand-on experience and understand what's in our tool, and we will be happy to do that for you. So now let's focus on some market data for Australia. First of all, I would like to show you where do we stand now. So on this graph, we have the development of electricity generation by source in Australia between 2010 and 2019. Here we have only renewable energy sources, and here we see this nice yellow line, which follows an upward trend between 2010 and 2019. And this trend tells us that the share of electricity generated by solar PV has been increasing on a regular basis in the last 9 years. More specifically, generation from solar PV increased by 50% per year through the last decade. We see that also wind has been growing quite steadily, so these are very good results for renewables in general. But nevertheless, if we put this into perspective and we include in the same graph also other generation sources, more specifically, if we include also electricity generation from coal and from natural gas, well, this diagram looks quite differently. We can still see the yellow line here, this is solar PV, but nevertheless, it's quite hard to identify this upward trend. We can still see that, but what we see is that there is a long way to go. In fact, in 2019, solar PV accounted for about 6% of total electricity generation in Australia. Let's now focus on more specifically on installation data. On this graph, we have the newly installed capacity between 2016 and 2020 by segment. So we identify 3 main segments: residential segment, commercial segment, and industrial. From a general perspective, we see that new installation has been growing year by year, topping at about 4.6 gigawatt new installation in 2020. What we can clearly observe on this graph is that PV installations boom in 2018, and this boom was mostly driven by the growth into the industrial segment. That here we see that the industrial segment in 2018 grew way more than in the previous years. And with the industrial segment, we identify installations above 500 kilowatt peak. On the other hand, we can also see that the residential segment, so the segment below 10 kilowatt peaks, has been growing steadily year by year by about 30% on average. So generally speaking, we see that rooftop installations have been growing steadily in the last 5 years, while large projects took off in 2018. So now I would like to provide you with some comparison. In fact, we do analyze the market developments in different markets worldwide. Here we have 5 of the European core markets and Australia. And we see that we're having a look at newly installed capacity again. And we see that Australia has added 4.6 gigawatt in 2020 and ranks between Germany and the Netherlands, which means that Australia has been growing more than most of the core European markets, but it's still second to Germany. So here we have 6 markets, and also for each of those 6 markets, we conducted a study addressing solar installers, and later on, my colleague Saif is going to provide you some more insights on each of the results of this study for Australia. So from a cumulative perspective, if we add the 4.6 gigawatt to the 15 gigawatt of solar PV, which was already installed in 2019, we see that Australia reached 20 gigawatt of cumulative installed capacity in 2020. And from 2018 to 2020, the solar PV market in Australia has been following a stable growth. So we usually take into consideration 3 main aspects when analyzing developments of a solar market. Generally, we keep track of economic development, solar PV and technological development, but we also focus on regulation and framework conditions. In fact, they play a key role for the development of the PV market. First of all, just a few words about the development in the last years. So basically, until 2012, the Australian PV market grew steadily, especially due to feed-in tariffs. When the feed-in tariffs have been withdrawn, the solar PV markets slightly slowed down. So between 2013 and 2016, the PV market in Australia kept growing, but slower. But from 2017, especially the rooftop segment started to grow again, and this was especially driven by competitive pricing of PV systems. I would like to focus on few funding schemes which are active in Australia, and the primary support mechanism is the Renewable Energy Target, which is a green certificate system which encourages the additional generation of electricity from renewable sources to reduce greenhouse gas emission. So it's important to differentiate between 2 main applications: the large-scale renewable energy target, which applies to PV system above 100 kilowatt peak. But we need to know that this scheme was ended for new entrants in 2020 because the target of 33,000 gigawatt hour was met. On the other hand, the small-scale renewable energy scheme is still active and applies to PV systems up to 100 kilowatt peak, and it basically provides a financial incentive for individuals and businesses to install small-scale renewable energy systems such as rooftop solar, and this, of course, specifically in the form of small-scale technology certificates. When we look at Australia, it's really important to differentiate from state to state. In fact, there are many funding schemes, but they differentiate according to the state. In fact, there are many schemes which are available right now. Here I've listed 2, so this is not a comprehensive list. I just decided to select 2 of them, and one is provided by the South Australian government, and it's called Home Battery Scheme, and it basically provides a subsidy for household batteries. The other one is provided by Solar Victoria. It's called Solar Home Package, and it delivers rebates and interest-free loans for solar. I'm sure we're gonna hear more about those 2 programs later on. From a general perspective, just to give you an idea about what's the policy doing in Australia to support the development of renewables, in 2020, 7.7 billion Australian dollars were invested in order to support the deployment of renewable energy, and this means that about 300 Australian dollars were invested in Australia per person. And this is more than in other countries like Canada or Germany. So which tells us that generally there is a strong investment in renewables in Australia, and this forecast is expected to continue. What does that mean in numbers and for our market? So this means that if we focus on one specific segment, so the rooftop segment in Australia, we expect that until 2030, 24 additional gigawatt will be installed in the form of rooftop installation in Australia. Just to give you a better idea, in 2020, 2.6 gigawatt were installed in terms of rooftop installations in Australia, meaning that about 300,000 rooftop installations were added to the grid in 2020. If we put this into perspective, then we look at the rooftop installed capacity between 2012 and 2021, we see that the market has been growing steadily. Nevertheless, between 2013 and 2016, the growth slowed down a little bit, but then in 2017, rooftop installations start to grow again. And we expect the rooftop segment to grow by about 2.9 gigawatt in 2021, which means that the rooftop segment in Australia offers a huge potential. So stay tuned, because later on my colleague Saif is going to provide you some insights on how to exploit and take advantage of this huge potential in order to expand your business in a rooftop segment in Australia. Now, I would like to briefly summarize the results of my presentation. We have seen that the amount of electricity generated by solar PV accounted for only 6% of total electricity generation in 2019. And we've also seen that the residential PV sector has been growing steadily by 30% on average on a yearly basis. Generally, Australia offers multiple funding schemes, which nevertheless differ from state to state. The future ahead looks very bright. In fact, we expect the rooftop segment to keep growing in the coming years. And in 2021, we expect 2.9 additional gigawatt to be installed in form of rooftop installations in Australia. So thank you very much for your attention. If you're interested in receiving more market data for Australia or also for other markets, just please get in touch. My name is Davide, and here you have my contact details. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of today's presentations. Bye.
Grazie mille, Davide. That was a great presentation, and obviously you already shared a very good outlook for the PV market in Australia, especially the rooftop segment. And as Davide mentioned, if you are interested in a demo version of our Global Energy Transition Matrix, please get in touch. I with Davide and myself or anybody at EOPD Research. We're happy to help you and support you. And there's going to be a lot more markets in the future to come that's going to be covered by the matrix. As Davide mentioned, and it's a great segue to my presentation for today, the rooftop segment in Australia is amongst the largest in the world. And it's important to lift these potentials, and one of the best ways to do so is to get to know the key market intermediaries, the PV installers, which is why I would now like to present some exclusive insights from our recent annual installer survey. So if I could share my screen, then I can. That's all you can speak with me. Okay, so we have some slight technical problems. So Warwick, if you can hear me, would you be ready to briefly present? Then I'd like to introduce you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So everyone, sorry about that. Slight technical difficulties here in Germany at the moment. It's not the only crazy thing going on, but we're getting used to it. No worries. I'll present a little bit later on today. So we're going to move up in the schedule, and now it's my distinct honor to introduce Warwick Johnston, Managing Director at SunWiz. So probably I don't need to introduce Warwick, but I still do. Everyone knows him. He founded SunWiz in 2009 with a mission to enhance the solar industry, and has been supporting, well, currently up to 1,400 companies in setting up business in the Australian PV market and counting. Warwick is currently a director at the Clean Energy Council as well. And as I was going to mention during my presentation, and I will later on, he's a trusted partner of EUPD Research as well. Today, he will tell us a little bit about the energy storage market in Australia with his presentation, Growing Bigger Than You Think, the Australian Battery Market. Warwick, it's good to see you. Have fun.
Thanks for that, Saif. Yeah, hope you guys are ready for a big presentation. I'm seeing there's some fantastic attendees in the auditorium. I'm sorry I can't see you face to face, but I'm looking down the attendee list. I'm just saying, you know, top quality people out there. We've got some top quality material we're about to show you. Wearing my t-shirt. I sell sunshine. I also sell storage. We don't actually sell it directly. We help solar businesses to function better and sell more in the solar industry. So let me jump into my presentation just to give you a flavour of what's to come. So quick little bit about us. Thanks for the intro, Saif. We share a great deal of similarity with EUPD. We are the market analysts primarily for the Australian market. Basically, every solar installation that goes in, we know something about, and are tracking things like market share by panel manufacturer, who are the top volume retailers, helping manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers with their growth strategies, etc. Our mission is to grow the solar industry by making solar businesses outstandingly effective, and we deliver the solar businesses those tools, wisdom to enhance effectiveness and to grow a high impact business. As Davide was typing or giving us a presentation, I couldn't help but put together this slide. When I started in the solar industry back in 2005, Australia was a cottage industry, and I was really just looking towards getting a job in Germany as the dream ideal. If I can make it in the solar industry, it would have to be there. And so I'm really pleased to announce that we in Australia are punching way above our weight. We're kicking goals. Australia leads the world. This is 2019 data on a per capita basis, and just nudged Germany out of that top spot in 2019 with a strong 2020 figure on a per capita basis. We've extended that lead. So go Aussie, go. And then I was looking at, well, what about storage? Again, this is some stats which are thrown together from the European side, so I may not be 100% accurate, but a quick bit of research. In 2019, Europe installed 745 megawatt hours worth of residential solar. Germany was the main focus of that. Australia in that year installed 268 megawatt hours. So again, on a per capita basis, punching above our weight, but also significant volume for any country. To me, that probably lags in terms of total volume behind Germany. But then you look at the cumulative amount that it's been installed, and again, I might be incorrect in my interpretation of what those figures were, but Australia seemed to have a cumulative tally that was just higher than Germany, which I was surprised at. Don't go to the bank on that one, but at least pat yourself on the back and be a bit excited. So we've been putting together, actually just released in the press last week, published in the Fairfax newspapers, the battery market report, which assesses all the trends which happened in 2020, facts and figures, and we use our own research blended with interviews with the leading manufacturers and suppliers of energy storage systems to come to a sense of what's going on in the market and what the tally is, and you'll get to see some of those figures now. But before we jump into those figures, there's some really interesting trends out there. One was that it used to be that there's a lot of announcements about big batteries, but not a lot of actual action on those. But we're seeing it's moving now from this solar farm or this wind farm will be is battery ready, i.e. they submit a DA and say, oh, we could do this if we want to. That's now moved to, this is critical and essential for us to operate this renewable energy farm successfully and integrate into the grid well. So that's one of the big sort of trends. Governments are supporting the batteries, both big and small, and we see their significant impact, particularly in South Australia, but also in Victoria. We're also seeing a lot of interaction with the market in those batteries. And so that is including what we see is things like co-location with existing network or existing generation. We're seeing storage influencing the network and the market, storage supporting the grid. And so for our international listeners, there was a point at which South Australia, a virtual power plant in South Australia acted to stabilise the grid and the entire NEM. In fact, when a fossil fuel power station tripped in distant Queensland, however many thousand kilometres away. And so you're starting to see this actually working, as well as when one of our states becomes islanded on occasion, those big batteries stepping in. But we're also starting to see volatile revenues where it used to be that the frequency control ancillary service revenue was making some of these batteries pay for themselves in as little as 3 or 4 years for a utility scale battery. That's outstanding. Now the bottom has fallen out of that market. Now there's so many batteries in there, and so adaptability is key. What we're also seeing coming on now is community batteries, and really interesting to see if these can navigate the regulatory barriers that exist in most of Australia towards their successfully being able to capture the revenue or the revenue streams that are possible. But if they can, what we've seen already from some of these ones is that it could be a much more cost-effective way of storing your excess solar is having a community battery rather than owning your own individual one. Virtual power plants have come to the fore, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment, but those are providing significant additional revenue streams for the time being at least, but seem to be very strongly related to that frequency control market, which isn't providing so much revenue for those batteries anymore. And of course, like at the end of the day, these trends are all sort of behind the number one trend, which is that home energy storage systems. And I think the only thing that's going to displace that in Australia is that potentially VPP on top of home energy storage systems. Maybe community batteries might displace that, but that's still some way off. So if you're going to be watching trends out there, virtual power plants, for their ability to provide additional revenue and additional subsidy. And actually just today, Giles Parkinson, who is presenting later today, put out something on his website, Renew Economy, related to Tesla now offering additional virtual power plant benefit of a $2,000 discount plus some guaranteed grid credits each year for those participants in its virtual power plant in South Australia. The other thing we're seeing now is finance sort of becoming more of a mainstay in batteries and becoming more normalised too. We did some financial analysis, and this chart shows for each of the different major states in Australia what the first year return on investment is with a range of different system sizes. And when I say system sizes, I'm talking about kilowatt hours of storage, and for a 7 kilowatt PV system. And so what is the effectively the inverse of the payback? So here, South Australia, PV system, typically, 5-year payback, can be much cheaper. This is very, very typical and theoretical pricing. But as soon as you put storage in, then of course the payback gets worse. And what we're seeing here, in the absence of subsidy and virtual power plant, then you're looking at getting 14% of your investment back in the first year. So that's about a 7-year payback, and that gets worse as you put on a larger system. But when you kick in the subsidy and then potentially add a virtual power plant payment, and here we're modeling the AGL VPP just because it's simple, easy calculation to do, you can see a significant uplift in revenue and therefore return on investment. That can apply subsidy and VPP in Victoria as well, and take what is otherwise basically a 10-year payback up to a 7-year payback for a typical customer. Again, it does vary significantly depending on pricing and your usage. And you can see there that uplift can also affect other states, and see how that varies by state as well. So let's move forward. And it's that, the financials, which, let me come back to that in a moment, actually, pardon me. My slide here is actually on the non-residential volume here. You can see this chart is of the capacity in kilowatt hours of the non-residential projects that have happened in each year, and the number of projects, and essentially who's winning them. The key take-home message here is Tesla is winning the lion's share of these big batteries, not just Hornsdale, but many of the other ones as well. The other key trend that we saw this year is actually that the volume that was installed of these large-scale batteries actually fell back quite considerably, but we expect with everything that's in the pipework that this is going to significantly expand. And our battery report goes into a lot more detail about what's in the pipeline as well. Worth noting, the market share is very, very different in home energy storage systems. It's certainly not the case that Tesla has 80–90% market share. So if you want to know more about that, again, we go into the details of market share from a range of different statistics, external sources in our battery market report. Worth noting that all the information that manufacturers provide us is confidential, so we never disclose the information that they reveal, but are able to identify some proxies there. Again, more detail in the report. These are the figures you've all been waiting for. What was the number of installations of batteries and their capacity that got installed in 2020? And it was actually a surprisingly high figure, and surprised many of the manufacturers, in that it was a figure that was, when they gave their market estimate for 2020, at the end of 2020, it was actually higher than what they would have predicted at the start for most of them. And then also this figure was higher than most of their estimates. So basically most manufacturers saw that the market was smaller than what it actually turned out to be when you sum up all of their results. And that's my conjecture there, is that it's because of some increasing market share of particular brands, which I won't mention, but we're certainly seeing a market where batteries have become a bit kind of accepted by the public, and so they don't have to have the top brands to feel comfortable purchasing with purchasing a battery. Of course, there are still people who want that brand, want the brand name, and feel comforted by that, or happy to pay whatever the premium in there is. But there's certainly a new market coming in through for lower price batteries, and we saw that evidenced in market share too. If you break this down by state, what you see is that South Australia was the leading state, and that was significantly driven by its subsidy, which was very, very attractive, and also wound back in the year. And what happens in any Australian state is when a subsidy is wound back, whether it be for solar or storage now, people flock to it, and we saw evidence of that, despite South Australia having already market leading position. The market's cooled there since the reduction in its subsidy. Victoria and New South Wales market were also very large. Victorian market was obviously influenced by the subsidy, but actually not driven by it. And in New South Wales, there was very, very little of these installations that were subsidy driven. So there is a nice organic market happening there. Question at what pace it grows in coming years. This is a very confusing chart. Let's have a look at this black line as a reference line. This is the percentage of solar installations that include a battery by year. And so you can see that peaked in 2017 at about 12% of solar installations, including a battery, and then fell backwards before rising slightly in 2020. The narrative here is that the solar market has been growing much faster than the battery market, and it's been, as we saw with some of Davide's results, compound annual growth rate in excess of 30% has been hard, and such a white hot market, much easier to sell solar, that most of the focus has been there. That's starting to shift and will accentuate as electricity prices start to abate and the gap between import and export prices changes. But you can see here also the difference there between this black line, which is the national kind of average, and then the state line for South Australia, where 1 in 4 PV installations include a battery. I believe that's still quite a fair way off what can happen in some European countries, though. So look, when we combine the two markets, the behind the meter storage, they're in orange in terms of volume, with the in front of the meter market, the utility scale, the volume there in grey. You actually see that in terms of megawatt hours, the annual total was in 2020 was practically the same as what it was in 2019. Effectively, what was dropped in the utility scale segment there was picked up in residential solar in that between 2019 and 2020. So it's been a big year, and I'll be interested in hearing European colleagues' perceptions of where Australia fits in with that. Let's look at that cumulative market tally. That means we get to 110,000 systems installed in Australia to the end of 2020, 1.1 gigawatt hours of residential storage, and 415 megawatt hours of non-residential storage. There's been a huge amount go in. Manufacturers' predictions for 2020 and 2021, 22. Essentially, if you look at their median prediction of being 23,500, again, that was much lower than what actually went in. The median prediction there for manufacturers for 2021 was, some pretty significant growth, and then again some pretty significant growth again. So effectively, there's a decent amount of optimism about what's coming. And now that they know how big the market is, it'll be interesting to see how they adjust their perceptions on what will get installed this year, noting that there is a divergence of opinion, a divergence of views, and a significant divergence of data from centralised sources. We predict a market of 31,000 home energy storage systems in 2021. That's pretty much no growth, and an average of 10.8 kilowatt hours per system. So it's pretty much a repeat of what we would be doing. There is a growing pipeline of commercial utility scale storage that is in the pipeline. So we expect that we could get to 734 megawatts again. And if you're going to compare that to where we got to, I would have to hazard a guess that that's a significant amount more. Forgive me, I haven't actually looked at that in much detail. It's that grid scale market there which is driving the volume for 2021, depending on which projects actually get realised. I'm going to wrap it up there. There's so much more analysis that's available in the full report. It goes into depth and detail. It's like the Bible, and we've been really pleased with pre-sales from many manufacturers that we've interviewed who've said that that's exceptional value that's in there. Have a look at there. You can that link, you'll be able to download a sample and back issues, etc. So I recommend you go along to there for a taste of what else is inside. And also, hey, look, I am thrilled that the partnership between EUPD and SunWiz in bringing the installer monitor. There's so much fascinating, valuable information there, whether you're in solar or storage, particularly for companies that want to understand what's the best way to grow my market share, what's going to be the most effective place to spend my money to improve how my purchasers see me. So please reach out. We're the Australian partner and sales channel there, so reach out to us if you'd like any more information on that as well. Of course, you can go direct to EUPD, but if you'd like to chat with somebody in the same time zone and same funny accent that we have in Australia, then please feel free to reach out to us. I'll wrap it up there and hand it back to Saif, who's hopefully resolved some of those technical issues.
Thanks so much, Warwick. Fascinating stuff as usual. It's always great listening to you and seeing the data that SunWiz has been preparing. If you want any more information on SunWiz product and service portfolios, Warwick mentioned, reach out directly. You can download the sample. And as Warwick has also mentioned, well, we also value the partnership with SunWiz across the big pond. And Warwick mentioned that we provide data on our installer surveys. If you are interested in the Australian report, which I am going to present now, actually, yeah, we have solved our technical difficulties, I hope. Then you feel free to reach out to Warwick, Peter, and the team at SunWiz, because they are our sales channel managers and partners for the Australian report. But in any case, it's always worth going onto the SunWiz website, following them on LinkedIn, and well, obviously speaking in person with Warwick and his team, because fascinating work that they've been conducting there. And congratulations on your contribution towards the PV and the solar battery storage market in Australia. I'm sure you've played a fair share, and it's great to see how those markets are evolving. So without further ado, now I would like to give you my presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. I'm already in the middle of my presentation. That's the slide that I'm going to show you later on. So, okay, there we go. Then, yeah, sorry about the technical glitch earlier on and the slide delay. Thank you, Warwick, for stepping in. I'd now like to present the results from our annual installer survey in Australia. As you can see,
Hi, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, sure.
It's the wrong mode. You have to change at the top Anzeigeeinstellungen.
Yep. Referenten.
And then
Vertauschen.
yes.
Oh.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. And again, apologies. Now we should be set for the results of our installer survey. As you can see, the presentation today is titled Conducting Successful Business Down Under, Downstream Insights and Brands. I'm just going to briefly skip through some of the slides. We're just going to show you sort of a pick of the litter of the results. If you watched the first presentation today from my colleague Davide, he already introduced EUPD research. Maybe in my own words, I've been with the company for 7 years now. In total, we're in our 21st year of observing global PV and energy storage markets, branching out into topics such as electric mobility as well. Davide presented our service portfolio. Maybe I could ask you to focus on the middle column. This is the top brand PV Seal. It's actually a byproduct or a result of the survey that I'm going to introduce. And you're going to see it popping up now more and more across the global PV markets. Please feel free to reach out for us to explain how you can obtain the seal. If you can obtain the seal, you can't, unfortunately, you can't participate on your own. You'll see in a few seconds now what it's based on. And I believe David also showed this slide. It's a short and small extract of our current partners. As you can see, some of the major players in the industry here as well. One more line regarding SunWiz. You can see at the bottom left that we have the SunWiz logo on our Australian report, not only because SunWiz supports us in sales, but SunWiz also supported us in creating the questionnaire and in providing the interviews. Let me now briefly explain why we have been focusing on the PV installers for so many years now. Pretty obvious, actually. The PV installer is the main intermediate between the PV industry or the different brands and manufacturers and the homeowners, the end customers, whoever wants a PV system installed. And our research over the years has shown that a very, very small amount of end customers actually have a brand in mind when they approach their installer to get a PV installation. Therefore, obviously, the installer is the key when it comes to the choice of brand and even technology. We're going to briefly talk about energy storage a bit later on as well. Warwick already mentioned it. Brands may not be important for the end customers as much, but the installer, he knows where he's going to get best value for money, sorry. And therefore, it's important to obviously be close touch with the installers and to know what they need and what they like. Again, maybe just to mention that you can reach out to SunWiz or EUPD Research if you're interested in Australian PV installer monitor. This is just a short slide with a few of the benefits. So it's going to help you optimize your marketing budget. You can improve your position amongst the competition. You can benchmark yourself with the competition as well. And I think what's most vital is to understand the needs and the demands of the installers who are in the end going to install your PV system on the roof, your energy storage system in the basement or in the garage, and obviously support the end customers with your service features. And further, the Global PV Installer Monitor 2020-2021 for Australia is based on a survey of 200 PV installers. The interviews were conducted between October and December of 2020, and they focus on the business year of 2020 and give a short outlook on 2021. It's only fair for us to mention that the residential segment is slightly overrepresented, and the larger segments are slightly underrepresented. That's just based on the random sample. So we have no control which installers participate. The first 200 interviews are evaluated and created for said report. Some information on the sample, on the 200 installers that we surveyed. So 38% mentioned that they installed more than 500 kilowatts in 2020. Which classifies them in our books as high volume installers. The rest is obviously classed as low volume installers. A lot of our slides are differentiated so you can see the difference in their buying behavior. 38% of the 200 do more than 500 kilowatts and in total account for 90% of the total installed capacity of the sample group in the Australian survey for 2020. As you can see, low, medium, and high volume installers focus on the residential segment. Davida mentioned the rooftop segment in Australia. Warwick mentioned it as well. It's one of the main drivers in the Australian market. As you can see here, nearly all of the installers focus their main business on residential or small commercial installations. We asked all the installers which are the segments of the energy transition they focus on. Very few focus on topics such as electric mobility. We're going to have a great presentation from Giles in a few minutes. And heat installations. Actually, smart home is the main topic or the main further segment that PV installers have been adding to their portfolio. It's a slightly different picture than in the European markets that we cover. It's going to be interesting to see why that is and how this is going to evolve over the next few years. But it's definitely a couple of topics, especially electric mobility, that we need to watch out and look for. Maybe just some other things that we focused on in our sample description, which are in the full report. We have a look at which cell technologies the installers use. We have a look at their attitude towards high efficiency modules as well. I'm going to give you one slight insight later on today. So it's definitely worth looking at the report, and please let us know or contact the team at SunWiz if you need further information, if you want to have a look at a demo video or maybe even an older report to get an idea as to what you may be getting. Now, I'm just going to give you some further insights from the Global PV Installer Monitor for the Australian market. This is from our procurement management chapter, definitely going to be interesting for the wholesalers in the Australian market. Later on, we have Rami from SolarJuice on the show as well. I'm sure he's going to appreciate this slide, which shows that direct procurement is relative to none. In Australia, only 8% of all the installers purchase their PV components directly from the manufacturers. 87% procured directly from PV wholesalers, and the rest from other wholesalers, electrical wholesalers, for instance. So this is a good sign for the wholesale landscape in Australia. We know we have a lot of wholesalers in the market as well who've been benefiting from the growth of the market and obviously their direct contact to the installers. The most important issues when installers are looking for a new wholesaler is the reliability to delivery dates. So our past research shows that installers are not too fussy if it would take a week or even longer, or 2 to 3 weeks to get their components, but they do need to know when they will have all the system components available so that they can plan and schedule the installation with their customers. Further, this makes up the top 3. Further important issues are guarantee and goodwill, and service features, including claims management. Topics such as pricing are also in the report. So if you want to know how important pricing is for installers, let us know and we'll provide you with the information. Having a look at brands, I mentioned the installers are key when it comes to the choice of brands. These 3 brands are the most known in terms of unaided brand awareness. So more than half of the installers were able to spontaneously mention Jinko Solar. And then they're followed by Trina Solar and LG Electronics. Interesting fact, and obviously highly relevant for market research. In terms of actual market players, this is also really interesting for the Australian market, because these 3, as you can see here, also make up the most offered manufacturers in the market. So as you remember, 57% of the installers were able to mention Jinko, and more than a third actually carry Jinko Solar products in their portfolio. As you can see here, we have a split also between solar installers and general installers. As I explained or briefly introduced the sample description, we also have this differentiation between high volume and low volume installers. Again, Trina Solar and LG Electronics follow in 2nd and 3rd position. However, there is a broad variety of brands being offered in the Australian market, and more brands are pushing into the Australian market. I know of a couple of German battery manufacturers who are going down under now. So really interesting to see how the brand landscape is evolving in Australia. Here you can see the top 3 offered inverter brands: Fronius, SMA, and SolarEdge. I brought this slide along today to also show you that we have a look at how exclusively installers offer the products in their portfolio. SMA may only be in 3rd position on this slide or in general, but they benefit from the highest exclusiveness. So 31% of the customers who offer SolarEdge told us that this is basically the only brand that they carry in their portfolio. So please let us know if you're interested in the report, because the report will also help you to understand how you can increase these exclusiveness shares. There are a couple of brands who are only used as space fillers or complementary brands. And if you want to earn market shares, then we need to talk, definitely. Again, Warwick gave a fascinating presentation on battery storage in Australia. I have to admit that the share of installers who offer energy storage in the portfolio has decreased from last year. It's not necessarily a bad sign. One explanation could be that in this year's sample, there were more general installers than solar installers. So this may explain it, but in general, the potential is still high. To explain the slide, the graph on the left shows you the total of 200 installers in the survey, of which 41% already carry energy storage in their portfolio, and another 29 plan to do so by the end of 2021. So if everything goes right, 7 out of 10 installers will have energy storage products in their portfolio. We can't neglect the 30% that mentioned that they don't offer energy storage and they're not planning to offer energy storage. So the next question, or the slide that I'm going to show you now, refers to this 30% or the 60 installers who claim to do so. We asked them to rank or to rate the following statements in terms of how they are relevant to their business. And as you can see on the far left, the main reason why these installers do not offer energy storage is the pricing. We can talk about the pricing, but this at least is the pricing in their perception. Furthermore, I think what's quite interesting to see is that a lot of installers are still not convinced by the technological maturity. So basically, I'm looking at you, energy storage providers. It's your business to be more transparent with the pricing and obviously also with the technical development of your systems. Once you convince these installers, then the share will grow and the energy storage market as well will grow. I believe Warwick said that there won't be much growth this year, but I think the industry is also responsible for that and has a lot more to do. And therefore, we hope and we support you in any way that we can. Last but not least, from the direct slides that I'm gonna show you today, this is unaided brand awareness for energy storage providers. As you can see here, LG, unfortunately, it's made up out of LG Electronics and LG Chem. We can't necessarily differentiate within the answers. Has the highest share of unaided brand awareness, but is closely followed by Tesla. Warwick mentioned Tesla as well in his presentation. Tesla is obviously also a power horse in terms of marketing and brand awareness. And in third place, with a considerable gap behind it, but ever growing, is BYD, who have been increasing their market shares also in our European samples. So they're definitely a company to look out for, originally from electric mobility. So that was the slides that I brought along. I did bring 4 more results just to show you a little bit of the depth that our report actually has. So we, of course, under the current situation, we have to speak about Corona, and we asked the installer how it affected their business in 2020 and how it's going to affect their business in 2021. 16%, that's where it comes from, of the installers expect the coronavirus pandemic to have a negative impact on their business, which obviously is a very small share, and the situation in general is perceived as less negative than it was in 2020. 29% believe that the regulatory framework conditions are currently affecting their business development. So Warwick and Davide spoke about the subsidy schemes in some of the states, but there's still a lot that the governments have to do to further increase or to further push renewables in Australia. Less than half of the high volume installers use modules with a performance between 300 and 350 watt peak. This is from our segment on high efficiency modules as well. And 85% of the installers stated that the manufacturing quality is the most important when choosing a module brand. Interesting to see the differences between Australian installers and some of our European installers as well. Spoiler alert, a low price hardly plays any role at all. So as I mentioned, important to know what the installers need and what they focus on when you're planning your current business development as well. That's all from me for today in terms of our own presentation. As I mentioned, if you do have any further questions about the presentation, our report, reach out to me and my team at EUPD Research or Warwick and his team at SunWiz. Thanks again for your time and for your attention. And now let's continue with the show for today. So up next, and I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker is Mr. Giles Parkinson, who's the founder and the editor of the Renew and the Driven, Australia's leading new services for renewable energy and electric mobility. Giles can look back at 30 years of experience in journalism and was honored with the Outstanding Contribution to Industry Award in 2020. He is here today to tell us what's shaking in e-mobility. So Giles, thank you so much for your valuable time and enjoy your time with us.
Can you hear me okay? I'm just not too sure whether I've actually hit the right button here. I was expecting a special invite, but
I can hear you great. You were going to get an invite as well, but
here we go.
You're with us here already. So thanks, Giles. Have fun.
Thank you very much. And excuse me, I didn't actually find my office or an office. So I'm sort of traveling at the moment. But I've been asked to talk about electric vehicles, so I can't think of any better place to talk about electric vehicles than inside an electric vehicle. And this is where I am actually sort of packed on the side of the road. That's okay. So thank you very much for the invitation. I've got a presentation which I'm going to try and share now. Here we go. What have I got here? Here we go. PowerPoint. Okay, hopefully that is now presenting to you, and I hope you can see that. Make a sign or something like that if you can't see it, or
we can
Chris,
see it perfectly, Giles. Thank you.
But can you please open it in full screen mode?
Oh, okay. How do I do that?
There we go. Ah.
Is that it? Nope.
At the bottom left corner, I think there's the presenter
yes.
presentation, the right one. Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thank you, and sorry about that. But I am in an electric vehicle, so there you go. Maybe it's not as good as they say. So just to give you a bit of a background, thanks for the introduction, Saif. I founded Renew Economy almost a decade ago now. Unfortunately, I've actually been in journalism for about 40 years now, so that biography must be a little bit old. Renew Economy has become the preeminent source of information about renewables and the clean energy transition in Australia, and is in fact well read and regarded around the world as well. We get about 13 million page views a year, and a couple of million people visiting at some point during the year, and about 50,000 regular sort of daily readers. So it's quite a powerful tool. We also launched One Step Off the Grid a few years ago now. That's a smaller publication, very much specialised in distributed energy, behind the meter, community-based businesses, individuals, off-grid, edge of grid, talking about those new technologies which sort of combine all that wonderful hardware we see, the rooftop solar and the batteries and things like that, and some of the sort of the policy issues there, which are becoming really prominent now, because as we've probably learned from the previous presentations, DER is the new big thing. Well, it's been a big thing for a while in Australia, but it's going to become like the dominant source, the dominant technology in Australia's grid. So it's going to move quite fundamentally from the centralised generation we have now to the distributed generation. And the forecast is that rooftop solar is going to provide anything up to about 40% of the supply of the main grid within a couple of decades, and how that combines with other things behind the meter is going to be absolutely integral. And of course, that's going to include electric vehicles. And 2 years ago, we launched The Driven, which is our EV-focused website. We saw the interest in electric vehicles in Renew Economy, so we decided to launch a new publication just so we could actually provide some specialization in that arena. And the response has been extraordinary. It's now running at, this month for the first time, it's over 1 million page views. It's catching up very quickly to Renew Economy. So it's going to have more than 10 million page views, and about between 2 and 3 million unique visitors this year. What that tells us is that there is this massive interest in electric vehicles, including in Australia. But the remarkable thing is, in Australia, while we have led the world, arguably, on the uptake of rooftop PV, we are dragging our heels really badly on electric vehicles. We are so far behind the rest of the world. I think now in Norway, for instance, you're talking about a 70% share of plug-in vehicles, maybe even 80% if you include the hybrids. In Europe, you're getting an average of about 10 to 12%. In some countries, it's in the teens. In other countries, it might be falling a bit behind that. In America, you're talking about 3 or 4%. In Australia, you're talking about 0.7% of the new car market. So you're really talking about a couple of thousand cars. I drove 2 days ago, almost 1,000 kilometres from Byron Bay to Sydney, stopped at 5 different charging stations, mostly to have a rest as much as anything else, because I was driving by myself. I had to go inland because of the floods in the east, and I did not see another single electric vehicle the whole way there, which is quite surprising, because where I live up north, there are quite a few electric vehicles, and there are some in Sydney. But to think that you could drive 1,000 kilometres and spend the whole day on the road and go to all these different EV stops and not see another one is indicative of the paucity in the market. And what are the reasons for this? Well, basically, we've got a pretty backward government. Now, This is the Man from Snowy 2.0, Man from Snowy River. Some of you might have seen that film from the 1980s. This is actually our Energy Minister, Angus Taylor. He likes riding horses, and some people would wish that he would actually ride off into the sunset, but he's not likely to do that. He's been a very strong anti-wind opponent before he entered Parliament about 8 years ago. He's now the Energy Minister. He's never been a fan of renewables, but he was never really in a position to stop them. And one of the interesting things about the electric vehicle market is that all the incentives for rooftop PV and renewables were basically put in by the Labor government when they were in power between 2007 and 2013. Electric vehicles are this new technology. They came after the coalition, the federal government came into power in 2013. So they actually have not given it the kickstart that the others have gotten. They've actually refused to do that. And they've said some really stupid things about electric vehicles in Australia. It's going to ruin the lives of the tradies, our electricians and other tradesmen, because they won't be able to use their utes, and they won't be able to do this, and they won't be able to do that. And it's going to ruin the weekend because you won't be able to go camping, you won't be able to tow anything. Angus Taylor has led this campaign, releasing all this disinformation about how electric vehicles will put up the price of the cost of buildings because of all the infrastructure that's got to go in it, and it takes 5 days to charge your car with solar from an electric vehicle. And look, it's just quite extraordinary. The result of that is that we actually have no EV policy in Australia. In fact, we have a new policy. They couldn't even bring themselves to mention electric vehicles. It's called Future Fuels Strategy. The acronym is FFS, and everyone knows English best well enough. They'll know what that also means. It's a bit obscene, so I better not repeat it on a public video. But a lot of frustration there, and that strategy is all about promoting the use of mild hybrids, not even plug-in hybrids, but mild hybrids. And there's basically no incentives for electric vehicles. In Australia is quite unique in the Western world of not having any fuel standards. Basically, we don't have any. So cars can emit as much as they want. A lot of European cars have to be detuned so that they can their engines can cope with the incredibly dirty oil that we import from Indonesia and other places, because we actually don't do much refining anymore in Australia. So it's an incredibly dirty place, and we're not doing anything about it because of the power of the fossil fuel lobby, the influence of the Murdoch media. And this is despite the fact that we have reports pointing out that, we get more than 2,000 people die quite directly from the emissions, not to mention the greenhouse emissions, but just the particulates that come out of our incredibly dirty vehicles in Australia. So I would like to see that will change. Well, there you go. Actually, I should have hit that thing before that button. That's the fake news campaign against electric cars, which it launched during the last election campaign. That's when you had the Prime Minister coming up and just sort of saying it's going to ruin the weekend and saying some really stupid things about EVs. Similar things that they've said about wind, solar and battery storage, but here they are really in a position to influence and hold back the rollout of electric vehicles. So I think there's about 170 models that you can get in Europe, 107 electric vehicle models. In Australia, you can get about 10. I mean, it's that shorter choice. That may improve this year with a few more people coming into the market, but a lot of companies like Kia, like VW have said, well, we don't see any point bringing electric vehicles into Australia because there's simply not the charging infrastructure there, and there's simply not the support, either real in terms of subsidies or whatever, or just sort of, even moral support, as in that's the way we want to go. This is a funny picture. On the right-hand side is Matt Keane. He's the New South Wales Energy Minister. He's actually a Liberal, so that's the Conservative, but he's actually come up with a really, really good roadmap for replacing the state's coal-dominated grid with renewables. He's also the only minister in Australian state or federal governments to actually own an electric car. And he actually owns a Tesla Model 3, like the one I'm sitting in now, and thinks it's wonderful. So he is the one shining light on electric vehicles, but he doesn't have much influence over policy on transport, unfortunately. And what we're seeing in some of the states who have been really good on the uptake of renewables, they're now talking about imposing a road tax on electric vehicles. So while you've got every other country in the world talking about electric vehicles and providing incentives and tax rebates and other mechanisms, in Australia, we're not providing anything like that, but we are talking about hitting them with an extra road tax. And that road tax supposedly supposedly the roads are funded in Australia with an excise on diesel and petrol prices. It doesn't actually work that way. That just goes into general revenue, but they argue that electric vehicles dodge that tax and that contribution, so they want to tax them. And that's a pretty bad sign. So that's going to cost about an extra $400, $500 a year in Victoria, which wants to put them in by July. We do have about 7,000 or 8,000 electric vehicles on the road now in Australia. That's out of about a market of 1 million new cars each year, and a whole market of about 10 million. So it's a long way to go. This is a Nissan Leaf, which I actually drove around Tasmania. I borrowed it, couldn't actually rent it because they can't get any EV rentals in Australia apart from just one or two sort of private people. But look, what there is, even though there's not many electric vehicles in Australia, there is a recognition that electric vehicles can contribute an awful lot to the grid of the future. Now, look, we've already seen that in Europe, and I think in particularly in Japan, we're just starting to see that sort of being engaged in Australia. There are studies that show that if we ever do catch up with electric vehicle rollout and we do get 50% of the fleet is electric, as Labor had promised in its election campaign a couple of years ago, they would like to have a battery storage reserve, which is about equivalent to Snowy 2.0, this massive pumped hydro project that we've got coming. So it's a massive resource, but the question is how to marshal a resource on batteries on wheels. And so there's a series of trials been happening around the country now. The biggest one's in the ACT. It will involve 51 Nissan Leafs, and just to see how that actually sort of engages with the grid, and more importantly, how the actual customers and the consumers want to engage with it, how willing they are to sort of leave their car. Most cars are parked for 95% of the day, but how willing they are to actually plug them in, what availability there is to plug them in. Are they going to be parking them in shopping centres, at train stations, at work or at home, and what the possibilities are there. So the Nissan Leaf is the only car so far that has actually brought with it the vehicle to grid technology in Australia. But while it's been here for almost just over a year now, it still has not actually working because the standards have not been approved. We're still going through all these trials. So that seems to me to be about another year off, even though we're actually seeing sort of real results in other countries. And I guess that sort of speaks to the slowness and the caution in Australia on the uptake of electric vehicles. The ANU, the Australian National University, which is one of the people, the key players in this trial in the ACT, put out quite an important report co-funded by the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, which is actually playing a key role in a lot of these programs. They talked about all the different aspects of vehicle to grid, VOG, which is just sort of manual charging, VIG, which is charging managed on behalf. You'll see down the bottom, vehicle to home, vehicle to business, vehicle to grid, and then this sort of vehicle to X, which actually just shows a tent, but actually sort of it just sort of actually encompasses the whole lot of the above, plus those random things that can happen with vehicles. You can take them camping, or you can power your house with a direct cord, or you can do whatever you wish with them. And what we might actually see first is not so much the vehicle to grid, but that vehicle to X, and that makes the Hyundai Ioniq, which is this next car I'm going to show you. Now that's coming out later this year. What's really interesting about this car is that it actually comes with a power point on the outside. So not just its sort of plug where you sort of plug your bidirectional charger. This actually has a socket, so it's just a bit like a power socket on wheels. You could use it for camping, you could use it for your power tools, you could probably use it for your house. If you ran out of electricity, you just run an extension cord out, plug it into the car. You got limited amount, but it's a power point, and you can sort of run your lights and maybe your fridge off that. And I did an interview for we have a weekly podcast called Energy Insiders, and we talked to Laura Jones from the ANU, and she was actually pointing out how important that would actually be in Australia, just for sort of encouraging the uptake, get people to start thinking about their electric vehicles as a battery, as something else other than a form of transport to get from point A to point B, carrying either humans or freight or other goods. And I guess that's got to be part of this education and part of this sort of transition for the consumer, as much as it is for the grid. And the grid will certainly be thinking about this because they can see this coming. And in Australia right now, we're starting to look at these new rules of the market, because we've realized that the old centralized form of the market, our energy only market, the thing that's been operating for the last 50 years, is no longer fit for purpose for the modern grid, which is about renewables and particularly about distributed generation. So there is an acceptance and a realization that those rules have to be adapted to, one, cater for rooftop solar, cater for battery storage, cater for electric vehicles, cater for all those smart software, the demand management, and present the right signals for those to be incorporated properly in the market. And that's going to be a challenge, because it's not simply as just sort of changing the shape of the market with the technologies that we have now. It's also about changing the shape of the market to anticipate the technologies as they might evolve. Because one of the things that we found with battery storage, for instance, is that they can do so much more than we actually thought, and maybe not in the way that that people imagine. So we discover new ways of doing things. We're finding that with inverter-based technologies on the main grid in Australia, particularly solving some of those system strength and inertia problems. People are finding that by tuning the inverters in ways that they actually hadn't imagined, even the manufacturers hadn't actually anticipated, that they can solve some of those problems. So how that interacts with electric vehicles is going to be really fascinating. Back to the predictions. Well, what are we going to get in electric vehicle uptake in Australia? This was the latest prediction from the CSIRO, who do a lot of work with the Australian Energy Market Operator in making predictions about the uptake of rooftop solar and battery storage and here electric vehicles. They talk about the slow change, which is what I think we're actually heading to at the moment, in the lack of anything else. And that shows like less than 10% share of new car sales. Actually, do you know what? I've actually done the wrong graph here. I've actually picked the wrong graph. I feel like an idiot. This is actually autonomous vehicles in Australia. So someone who's going to be sharp marker. I can see Nigel in the background there laughing his head off. There you go, Giles is stuffed up again. But look, the forecasts are basically that Australia, for the uptake of electric vehicles as a percentage of new car sales, will probably reach about 20 to 25% in the slow change scenario by 2030, with a little bit of incentives. And we're not talking about massive handouts, but just some support and some coordinated approach to charging infrastructure. We could get to 50%. But what's really interesting, as people would know from international arena, most of the major car manufacturers are actually swearing they're not going to be building petrol and diesel cars after 2030. Some of them are not going to be building them after 2025. In some countries, those cars are actually going to be banned from new sales from 2025, particularly Norway and some others. So my suspicion is that we'll probably, I think once the electric vehicle reaches price parity, as long as they can get to market in Australia, I think they're going to be unstoppable. And I think by 2030, there'll be well over 50% of new car sales. And by that time, I hope we've got it sorted as to how we can incorporate them into the grid, not just for actually charging them, because we don't want them all to come at 7 o'clock in the afternoon and plug in at the same time, but also how we can actually use them as an asset. And I hope that's given you a little bit of a taste of what's happening in Australia. It's contrary to what's happened with rooftop solar in Australia, where we are a world leader, but that's because the policies were in place and the current government has not had the stomach to undo them. Unfortunately, it hasn't had the courage to go forward with the EV policy, even though it probably knows it's a good thing to do. And we await with interest to see what happens over the next couple of years, and fingers crossed that they see some sense, or at least they accept that the world is transitioning and they might as well too. That's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that was informative. And I think our next speaker, by the looks of things, is that you, Nigel? That must be Nigel coming up. Nigel Morris from Solar Analytics. So I'll leave it back to the host.
Thanks so much, Giles. That was a class presentation presenting on electric mobility from your electrical vehicle. Couldn't have been a better setting. And yeah, tough to see that Australia faces similar problems as us, for instance, here in Germany, with the government, blocking further development. And obviously, we also have trouble with our infrastructure here, with intransparent tariffs, with hardly any charging stations to accommodate the vehicles that we already have on the road. Having said that, we don't have as many vehicles on the road here in Germany as we ought to have by now. So you mentioned FFS, the abbreviation. So yeah, I guess that makes sense in terms of electric mobility here as well. And thanks for already pre-introducing our next speaker, who I can see is ready. So next up, we're going to get another insightful presentation in terms of data from Nigel Morris. Nigel's been in the solar industry for almost 30 years, and for 4 years now, he's been the head of business development and a solar ambassador at Solar Analytics. He's listed as one of the top 20 energy influencers, so we're really excited to have you with us today, Nigel. And I believe in 2018, you were awarded the CEC Outstanding Contribution to Industry Award. Nigel will now offer us insights into the power of data for the Australian solar industry. Nigel, thank you so much for being with us today.
Saif, thank you. And lovely to be here. I hope there's still some people hanging on out there and listening in. I'm just going to try and find my my slides. Forgive me. There it is. That should do it. And if I go to present mode, that should pop up in front of you. If someone could shout out and tell me that they're seeing my slides, then I feel more confident.
Yep, looks great, Nigel. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay. Wonderful to hear all those statistics and data. As a former consultant in the industry, I get excited by hearing all the stats and data because it paints a picture. And what we've seen in Australia over the years is quite remarkable. We're a dinky little market down here at the bottom end of the world, but we're kind of the canary in the coal mine, and we're really willing participants, at least at the consumer level, to try new things. And if not at the government level, but certainly at the consumer level, the Australian psyche loves to experiment and be, hot off the block, so to speak. Also, terrific segue from my old friends Warwick and Giles, and particularly Giles. You tempted me. While you were doing your presentation on electric vehicles, I was tempted to run down to the garage and hop on my electric motorbike and do my presentation on my electric motorbike, but you one-up me there, mate. So instead, I'm down in the basement where I usually do a podcast with Giles. But without ado, I'm going to try and make my presentation proceed. There you go. Very, very quick introduction to Solar Analytics. We're a software company. Our mission is to get peak solar on every roof. And we essentially provide services for solar businesses and for solar consumers with the goal of getting more out of their solar. So, data is everything that we do. Ones and zeros, man. What's not to love about ones and zeros? We're founded almost 10 years ago. So, we're growing up quickly. We've got 50,000 sites, which it makes us pretty material, particularly in the Australian market. We've got 18 terabytes of data, 1,000 resellers, lots of staff. We're an approved relevant agent that I'll talk about, which is an important thing in Australia. So that's a very brief introduction to who we are as Solar Analytics and what we do. I'm a storyteller, and I love to tell a story, and I love to give context about why things are important. So I'm going to start with some history, because you can see this image of what a pretty typical solar control board looked like 10, 20, 30 years ago, perhaps back when I started in the industry. There was very, very little technology. A lot of it was homemade. There were virtually no standards because there was no market. And so, of course, there was a complete lack of scale. And so everything that everybody did was all about, you know, here's a problem. I'm someone who's interested in solving a problem. What can I do about that? And so in the context of data, we had zero. In fact, the best you could hope for might be a little voltmeter like you see on the image there. And in fact, I worked for a company where we installed boards looking very much like this, I'm embarrassed to say, but that was all there was. You simply, you know, the technology to do anything else was simply unaffordable for people who were off grid, and you know that was the entire market was, you know, ostensibly remote people or hippies who need a little bit of power to run their cabin or their farm. So you know, the valuable lesson that really taught me was that in the absence of data, you are really flying blind, and this happened to me over and over again, where we would have customers call up and say, look, my battery's gone flat, or I'm not getting the power that I expected, or something's not working properly. And, you know, why is that? And in the absence of data, we were blind. About the best that we could do 30 years ago was ring up on a landline if we were lucky, and get them to go and look at the meter and tell us what is the meter saying? What is the volts? What are the volts that you've got? What's the current that you can see? Give us that, and then we'd try and interpret it. And of course, what that all meant was that it was completely unsustainable as a business model. It was expensive to support. It was difficult to be correct. And it really, you know, all those years ago, almost 30 years ago, really highlighted to me that, you know, data is incredibly valuable as a business, and incredibly valuable if you're an end user who owns a solar system and wants to understand what on earth is going on. So that's just some context for you to give the background. And of course, an awful lot has changed in that time. Jumping right forward, all the way forward now to the benefit of wisdom that we get from, you know, being able to see more than 50,000 systems and having 10 years of experience in the market. We can see now exactly why data is so important. And this is a little snapshot of the performance level of, or in fact, the system status from a sample that I did only a month or so ago of our entire fleet. And what you can see there is that, you know, about 70% of all the solar systems that we were monitoring, we considered to be good. And about 22% had something going on. We weren't necessarily 100% confident. We've got some fabulous algorithms that will start diving into that, and we work with our installers and our end users at times to try and unravel those problems. And as our algorithms get smarter and smarter, we can do more and more diagnostically to actually determine it. Communications features quite heavily at around 7%, so that's mostly our older Wi-Fi technology. We now use exclusively 3G and 4G, and about 1% had a fault that we could absolutely identify. The 22% in the unknown category is really the one that is most of interest, though, because what that tells us is that something's going on that is unexpected, and that is the core to where you can convert ones and zeros data into meaningful insights. And that's what we really specialize in. The benefit of what I've seen and learned over the years is that stuff happens. Things change, trees grow and cause shading where they may not have previously caused shading. User behavior changes over time. And of course, in all of this, when you have end users in the mix, support really matters. So the reason why data is so important is because of these three key things. You won't succeed as a solar business without being able to support your customers. If you abandon them, that will come back and bite you, and it is inevitable that stuff will happen and things will change. And so this is where the power of data, and particularly the power of AI and the modern technology that we have available to us, can really help. The other thing, and I've tried to keep this to 5 main points. So the point number 3 is really all about building solar business. And, you know, as we saw from some of the wonderful data and stats that we had earlier on, Australia is is unique in the world in having an absolutely prolific amount of small-scale residential systems in the world. We are the masters of how to jam 5 or 6 kilowatts on a roof on Mrs. Jones's house. We do it like nobody else, and we have more companies out there in the market. Last count I did was somewhere around 5 or 6,000 solar companies out there. So, brutal competitive market. Everyone fighting for survival. And this is, again, where, as a former solar retail business owner and operator, I've had firsthand experience at this. What I learned was that operational efficiency was the key to survival. If you want to operate a business in Australia, no matter how big or how small you are, you need to focus on operational efficiency. You cannot afford to be getting on a landline and asking someone to send their bill to you, or have a look at their meter, or walk outside and look at the inverter. That's already cost you too much just thinking about it. And you can rest assured that your competitors are not doing it that way. They're looking for automation. They're looking for ways to streamline things. So, to be able to succeed, survive, and scale up in the solar industry in Australia requires really, really high quality data. I was chatting actually with one of the very largest solar installers in the Australian market recently, and he described to me how, and I'm not going to drop any brand names here, but he described the fact that he's got 2 inverter brands that are his primary brands that he supplies into the market. One of them, considered one of the most popular brands in Australia, very, very large volume manufacturer. The other one, less so, but it comes from a different part of the world, but growing in popularity and has a pretty substantial market share, but sort of the Johnny-come-lately to the industry. And he described to me that, the traditional premium inverter that he has on his price list has no ability to be remotely connected to and adjusted. So if there's a voltage limit that's required to be changed, or there's a new command that it needs to be sent to that inverter to meet the regulations or standards, or some other change to that inverter, he needs to do a truck roll. And a truck roll is just lost money to a solar business. And conversely, the upstart in the industry, the new company that he's working with and who he's using inverters from, provides him with the ability to remotely dial up that inverter, change whatever he needs to change, and that can be done with an operational person sitting in the comfort of an air-conditioned office from literally thousands of kilometers away. So his view was that truck rolls was the number one cost to his business. And of course, the more successful you are, the more problems you will inevitably have, the more customers you're going to have, the more truck rolls you're going to have, unless you get this stuff under control. So how do you solve that? You solve that with data. There's also an awesome growing automation opportunity, and we've been at the forefront of this at Solar Analytics. One of the things that we now provide, and you can see a screen grab there, for example, is an automated diagnostic check for the hardware that we provide. That used to be quite a manual process, and about 18 months ago, we introduced a new process whereby when the installer gets to the final stage of installing our hardware, rather than having to do a whole lot of manual checks, did I get the polarity correct on my CTs? Have I got the phase rotation correct? If it's a 3-phase site, is my load appearing correctly? Is the power factor correct? Is the solar inverter doing what we would expect? We automated that for them. And if everything is perfect on that site, in somewhere around 5 seconds, you'll get a whole heap of green ticks on that box that has automatically run a system check on that installation and made sure that that site is perfect before the installer leaves site, so that they don't have to make a return visit. So the opportunities for automation, not just with our hardware and software, but with others, are immense. And that all means savings for business and the opportunity to scale up and grow. And in a market like ours, where we have such a profound, 300,000 solar rooftop systems installed last year, a profound amount of systems that need to be installed every year. You know, our largest installation company installs around 3,000 systems a month. You don't want to be getting that wrong. And so to be successful and to scale, data is absolutely essential in our market. The other thing, of course, that is essential in any solar market, and Australia is absolutely no different, is customer joy. We all want to be like this delightful lady shouting from the rooftops about how wonderful our solar is, having the promises delivered that we were given by the solar company that we're dealing with. And of course, in a competitive market, in a really tough market, transparency and trust is absolutely quintessentially important. You aren't going to get the sale unless you can demonstrate to that customer why they can trust you. And how can you demonstrate that? You can demonstrate that with data. You can show them examples of how you've saved money for customers previously, how you were able to help customers through fleet management or a whole variety of different tools. The other thing that that solar consumers know very, very quickly in Australia when they get connected to solar is that transparency is absolutely essential, because electricity bills in Australia are deliberately designed to confuse you. Incredible, I know, but you know, the electricity companies, the retailers in Australia have built our bills in a way that makes it pretty hard. Well, actually, I'm just going to come out and say it's impossible to know whether your solar system is actually performing well and whether your consumption has gone up or down. You have absolutely no way of knowing that from what you would see on a traditional electricity bill. So transparency becomes essential, because the only reason, the 99% of solar consumers, the primary reason they buy a solar system is to save money. That's the tangible thing that they get out of it. So you can rest assured pretty quickly after they bought that solar system, they're going to be saying to you, show me the savings. Did you sell me a lemon, or did you sell me savings? And where are those savings and how can I save them? Because, by the way, this bill is confusing the crap out of me. So transparency and trust is really, really important. The other way that you need to support customers, and again, I'm going to come back to the scale thing in our market. It's so important. If you are going to grow in your business, and whether you're small or whether you're large, whether you've got a small number of employees or hundreds and hundreds of employees, you still have the same issue that you're going to have to support them. So data becomes essential. You need to be able to quickly understand what's going on with that system. You need to be able to do remote diagnostics. You need to be able to troubleshoot. You need to be able to make potentially some remote changes. And so better support becomes a critical survival mechanism. And of course, it is the way you win referral customers. It is the way you win the next customer, by making your customers joyful like this happy lady. The other thing that we're seeing, of course, and Warwick gave some great stats on batteries, and Warwick and Giles talked about the slow uptake of EVs in Australia, but they will come, and they will come in a massive surge despite the government. And so what we're seeing with the uptake of batteries, and what we will see with the uptake of EVs, is complexity in these systems. They're no longer simple, basic little, 2 or 3 kilowatt solar systems that are just left to do their thing. There is a menagerie of things going on. There's diversion, there's control, there's remote access, there's all sorts of things going on. And so the key to all of that, of course, is meeting those complex needs in simple ways, so that customers can have whatever they want as best as you can do. And lastly, to round out the slide, of course, I'm going to jump right to Grid 2.0 and come back to the beginning, where I talked about how innovative Australians are as a people. We have one of the longest and most remote grid networks in the world. And so resilience and the robustness of that grid is critically important. And solar is now, despite the history of being accused of being the problem, we're actually now widely recognized as being a major contributor to actually building grid resilience. And the naysayers have well and truly been left behind, and they now recognize that actually solar and smart inverter technology helps build grid resilience. And that's, of course, extends into batteries, both large and small scale. We also have the ability to now do preemptive fault detection. And so some of the clever things that we can do with data is identify faults before they become a big problem. Wonderful thing for an end user, wonderful thing for a business. The most joyful thing you can ever do as a solar business owner is ring a solar owner and go, you don't even know you've got a problem, but I'm on the way to fix it before it becomes a big problem. And customers are just absolutely delighted by that. The other part of this that we know, of course, is that renewables are, and the IEA said it beautifully last year, the lowest form of energy, the lowest cost form of energy ever in the history of the world. So we can do stuff with low cost energy like no one else. And Australia is the canary in the coal mine for delivering bag loads of cheap energy. And of course, to do that, what you need to do is orchestrate. And so we are really leading the way. And in fact, going down to South Australia, which has been touched on before, you may not be aware, but in fact, not the weekend just gone, but the one before that, there was history made in Australia yet again. And in this case, what happened was there looked like there was going to be a pretty bad event. We had an interconnector down between South Australia and Victoria. We then had a fire in a substation. We had very, very low load, and the grid needed stabilizing. And there are a number of mechanisms that can be triggered to do that. And one of them is a brand new policy that was introduced only in September last year that enables solar inverters at a household level to be remotely connected to and turned off to stabilize grid voltage if need be, or to manage load. And that in fact was enacted 2 weeks ago for the very first time. 70 megawatts of solar, residential, commercial, and a little bit of large scale stuff was remotely connected, disconnected for the very first time as a grid stabilization mechanism. Absolutely groundbreaking historical stuff right here in Australia as usual. And this is, in fact, exactly where we're heading. Grid resilience, lower energy costs, and using distributed renewables right down to the household level to actually keep the lights on for the rest of the country. And it's an honor and a privilege to actually watch this happening in such an innovative way. That's me. I hope that gives you a couple of insights into how you can build business, how you can keep the lights on, and how you can prepare for the future using data and ones and zeros, my favorite subject. And thanks to the previous speakers, and thanks to everyone for the opportunity to speak here.
Cheers, Nigel. Thanks so much. That was a great presentation. And obviously, as we are market researchers ourselves, I know my colleagues will be buzzing with all the data that you have given us. Also good to see that Australia is leading the way in terms of new innovations. And I thought what was really insightful, most important, because so many don't know or don't understand, is how cost effective solar really is. And for that, I don't think there's any reason that government should be blocking it, and that we shouldn't be further evolving the market. So Nigel, thank you so much. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Nigel and his team at Solar Analytics. You can reach out to all of our speakers, either via DigiCon or directly, and you can download all the presentations after the show. If you do have any questions, please feel free and don't hesitate to reach out to us. Next up, we've spoken about so many industry relevant topics, but there's one topic obviously that affects us all at the moment. It's the coronavirus, the corona pandemic. And our next speaker is going to include that in his presentation. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rami Fedda, who is the co-founder of SolarJuice. Rami started his career in the solar industry in 1997 with SolarX, and has been active in nearly every step of the value chains ever since, from manufacturing and planning to raw material sales and obviously global procurement. In 2009, he established SolarJuice as one of the leading wholesale distribution companies. And his presentation today is titled Product Disruption 2021, How PV Supply Chains Are Affected by COVID and Product Standards. Rami, it's good to see you, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Sophie. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear and see you.
Okay. Okay, thanks for the intro. Look, I am going to touch on COVID, but to take it upon myself, but to cover some other areas where I think I can add some value. Screen. Presentation's not coming up. 1 second. Sorry, guys. Okay, found it. Okay, how do you full screen mode? Bear with me, guys. Sorry. See, okay. So, as I said, I'll be discussing supply
Rami,
chain.
sorry for interrupting you, but can you please go to display settings and switch over, because it's the mode with your comments. You can go to presenters mode one more time.
Presenters mode.
Yes,
How do I do
as you had seconds ago.
Okay. Oh, so you can't see the slide.
We can see the slides, but in the wrong presentation mode. Please go to the bottom right corner and click on the presenting button one more time.
Presenting button.
Yes.
Right. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Is that better?
Now you have to go to display settings at the top, and I think you have to choose the first one. Yes.
Is that better?
Just
Guys.
a second. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So, just highlighting some of the contents. So, COVID and supply chain issues. Which items have been impacted in the supply chain? Impact has it had on solar panel pricing. Also, I want to touch on the solar panel brands consolidating in terms of market share, and the product shift moving forward to the shifting in the size of wafers has an on-flow effect with solar panels. So, this actually posted on Facebook in challenges we had in 2020. Initially, China was impacted, and we were scrambling. I mean, we were suppliers. Please put as much, inverters inside your container, and yeah, we're happy to take as many panels out. Then all of a sudden, I don't know, 6 weeks, there was a sudden change being in lockdown. So at one stage, to bring in as many panels as possible, all of a sudden we wanted, outside of what shifted from us to our customers, in case there was a lockdown. And at the same time, Australian dollar collapsed, as you can see on the left. Initially, I mean, it doesn't show what the price or where the Australian dollar was back in February, but it was somewhere hovering slightly above 70. But as you can see, range, it hit as low as 56. As it was declining, we were, deciding whether or not. Then Australia lockdown, things looked okay. We were back at work, and the Australian recovered. You can see, from the graph, by June, it was already above. Then the second wave happened in Melbourne. We overcame that, and an explosion at a polysilicon factory in China. I think there was 2 separate facilities where there were explosions, and that's what sort of triggered this post back in August. And once I posted that, within a flood. It was over, from recollection, it was either or a cell facility. I think it was Tongway's line, which also impacted Q4, even more challenging, and that's when we started. Freight prices just skyrocket. You can see on one of those headlines, comments like, "I've never seen this. Chaos strikes global." So there was two challenges. It wasn't just pricing, and this truth still exists at the current. It's not just pricing, but it's also able to access container boxes. Even though the manufacturers produced it, it doesn't mean we'll see anytime soon. So we were expecting containers to arrive. However, the manufacturer wasn't able to containers or a slot on the vessel. So where we thought we would receive product, it actually arrived just recently. So there was a massive delay there. And another recent challenge is continuous increases in terms of polysilicon pricing, flow effect with wafers and cells and panels, and in the supply demand, and in the further slides. Polysilicon. So in this, you see that spike right at the beginning of the graph. So the red line, the polysilicon made by Chinese manufacturers, and the blue line is from overseas supply. So that's what in August, when the explosion happened, the pricing, it triggered pricing to increase. Then slowly it started declining. Then it started increasing quite rapidly. Of late, you can see there, based on the chart, you can clearly $13.50. Part is, I think, from early March. I checked the latest pricing, and it's hit another 10% increase, where it's hit current $14.14. And in a further slide, actually dig and levelize the price to $1 per watt, because these price increases mean nothing to people. When you levelize it to $1 per watt, you can see the actual effect on the panel price. I said, I think there's been no accidents recently, so it's purely just supply demand. Posted some examples on the right hand side. The large manufacturers are just cornering the polysilicon supply to help for them. But the lesser known, don't have maybe the deposits to hold the stock. Spot market at much higher rates. Glass, around July, it was quite stable. Then all of a sudden, everything just happened before, just skyrocketed. And again, I believe just supply demand. The market grew. The second half of the year, I'm pretty sure, posted on here in this presentation, but majority of China's consumption was in quarters, especially the last quarter. On top of that, because they saw there was some constraints, all of a sudden they just loaded up massive and in addition, coupled with maybe not the residential space, the uptake of bifacial, but space, it's really picking up. And you can see on that chart time since 18, 19, and 20, the market share for bifacial has increased quite rapidly. And with most cases, if they don't have a clear backsheet, you require pieces of glass. And earlier, China had a mandate where they didn't allow glass manufacturers to expand. And with solar just growing, at least 30%, had a tipping point. And earlier this year, they reversed that. This allowed existing manufacturers, even new production facilities to be. And again, I levelized that. So that 43 RM translates to around $6 USD, and I was trading at about dollars. So you can see there was a bit of a jump there on glass. Even though that's December's pricing, I've checked this month's pricing. It's still tracking around RMB, which translates to $6 USD. Freight, I've provided on the left Shanghai freight index. From 2020 to today, it's tripled. It shows that there's a bit of a decline, but I checked with with manufacturers, pricing is still the same. So that text I provided below is from an article, but knowledge freight before COVID and before this increase from Q3 was tracking around $900 to stuff a box and move it from Shanghai to Sydney, looking at anywhere between 3,500 to 4,000. And I heard from a few men to get a container slot before Chinese New Year, they'll $7,000 USD. So it's massive increase. You can see the headline there up on the right-hand corner. They're talking about a 500 to rise in freight charges, and it's caused all sorts of problems, especially price-sensitive projects scale, where they had to cancel the projects altogether or push out. That pricing comes down. Here's where I've tried to levelize the costs to see the understanding of the actual impact dollar per watt with this increases, glass increases, and freight versus the price where it was previously. Yeah, so I've tried to split it up so you can get a good idea. And yeah, 1.5 cents and 0.7 for the glass and 1.1 for. You consolidate those numbers together, it comes to around 3.3. Again, this is an estimate, but I'm pretty sure I've used my background knowledge to help derive. And yeah, it works out to be around 3.3, which increases the solar panel price by at least or close to 14%. And again, I use the average price on some of these websites, these PV Insights and Trend or PV Info. However, that's an average price where you're the top 5 Super League panels, like your Trina, Jinko. They command actually a higher price. The price is around 24 cents a watt, and I can tell you now, and we move a decent amount of volume. Maybe some of the lesser name brands, but I'll move forward to the next slide, and this sort of ties in with the argument. Where in the past we were able to access panels which weren't in the or top 10 and get like a 3 cents a watt versus your top end panels. However, that's just vapor. That they were not lucky enough, but they were able to in better polysilicon pricing, better glass, which put them in a better position where up with the likes of the T2 or the companies outside the top 6. That's why I think the market will definitely consolidate. And I punched in this. I've just consolidated on my own. I've in all the expansion, planned expansion or nameplate capacity that each of the leading players are planning to have in 2021. And when you together, just the top six players, you get 200 megawatts. Sorry, 200 gigawatts. Last year, the market was somewhere between, I've seen different records, 140, 56 or 165. As you can see, basically smashes it. I mean, a lot of just because a company has a nameplate doesn't mean numbers, but I'm the top 6 will easily take share in 2020. Yeah, so and 2020, the top 10 managed to have a market 8%. And as I said, I'm predicting the top 5 or top 6 will be able to achieve that this year. This is the next area I'd like to touch. With wafers sizes shift, we will naturally see panel size. So already in the last 2 years, I mean, Nigel can probably attest to this. I used to work for SolarJuice, from the late 90s. We never footprint changes, maybe every, lucky to see one. Initially it was like a 1, and moved to 125, like a 5-inch and a 6-inch wafer. All we saw all the way up to 2011, where one the norm, and all the way to 2018, where they managed to get further gains. Where it was 2 way to, you can see on this little table I put together, 330, where I mean with 156 you could easily get to M0 or M2. You can easily get to 350, but with 158 and then you half cut it, you get to the that, and from 330 to 370 happened probably after Q1. Right away, quite surprisingly, it sort of was a new bread and butter. Based on this next slide, survey out, and before the 370s came out, and was indicating they preferred actually the 370. I mean, a lot of people had concerns around weight, and but it was actually everyone moved to 370. And I put a just 2 months ago to thoughts are around the new weight, the 210s, which are, and that's at the, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, so the 3,400 range. So as you can see, kilos, and the majority were happy with the 370. So to go up to 22 kilos, not many were happy with that. Only 42% were happy to use anything above 22 kilos. Well, with the 210, it came in at 21. I was expecting it to be around 22, but keep in mind, this large a lot larger. However, as you can see, instead of there should be 40 cells on the 390, and as you can see, 400 watt, it's 40 cells of. However, it's cut into 3, which makes up 120. So it's equivalent to the current cell format. And the reason why I think the most popular product will be the 390 is because it fits in well with that sweet spot of 6. Where the 400 will be more suitable 8 kilowatts or the 10. Moving on. So not everyone is leaning towards 210. There's 2 camp, 10 camp, and a 182, and it's evenly split between 2 camps of really big heavy hitters. So over here, I've tabled them. So with the 210s, you got your Trinas, your Horizons, and Canadian. On cells, you have Tongwei, Ranergy, and wafers, TZS. 2 Longji Jinko JA, and again, looks like bets. They're able to produce both, because my guess is the tooling's very similar, and Longji has placed their bets on 182. And as you can see, I've placed above the market share on the cell level and panel level, and probably, as you can see, it's quite evenly spread because between TZS, they are 75% of the wafer production, and if you sort of club the numbers for the cells, and you get a similar ratio there as well. Very interesting, because I can't. Maybe to begin with, they'll probably run parallel. If history repeats itself, in the past, multi. Back in the old days, coming from SolarX, just multi, and BP was mono, and it sort of ran have 50%, and the other one might edge a bit, up until surprisingly majority was multi. And GCL, not saying this will happen with 182 and 210. You can see if you pick the wrong technology, or in this case, I'm sort of making an analogy, would be seeing some companies invest massive capital. It could backfire on if they place their money on or invest the money on technology. So GCL was heavily in with poly. Longji was all in with mono. Clearly see the tipping point was 2018. GCL started losing money. Longji just skyrocketed in year over year, and I think till now they're the most profitable company, not just out of but globally. Interesting to see what happens here with 210. And with the following slide, the last slide, see, I mean, this is just purely a forecast. No one knows. No one's got the perfect crystal. Of course, have tried to, and they've sort of have it almost evenly in 182, or what should they have is 180 plus. So maybe there's other wafers in over time, but versus two gains ground year over year. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see which wafer size takes charge. But you can see with the M6, which I think will phase out because I feel, based on what happened, the transition between 315 and then 330 to 3, And I feel that with the new way, which translates to 390, 400 for the for the residential market, and I believe they also have a 390 product. I wasn't able to get my hands on this. It was just emailed to me of late, but I'll update my presentation and share it. But yeah, that's all for me, guys. Hopefully the connection wasn't too boring, but it is, to me, it is quite interesting to touch on it. Thanks, guys.
That was a great presentation, and yeah, it'd be great if you can just update that slide, and then we can make it available to all the listeners and everyone who will visit Solar and Storage DigiCon. This obviously goes for all presentations today. Once again, thanks to Rami from SolarJuice. And last but not least, on our roster now we have Jefferson Zhu, Senior Technical Engineer at Jinlong Technologies. Jefferson graduated from the New South Wales University in 2017 with a degree in engineering and a major in renewable energy, which is highly interesting. Jefferson has been in the solar industry ever since he graduated, so for 3 years now, and he's been providing diligent technical support in relations to all matters of the Jinlong Technologies product portfolio. Today's last presentation is titled Solar's Upgrades Smart Storage Solutions for Homeowners and Installers in Australia. Jefferson, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thanks. I'm going to share the screen. So I think everyone can see the screen. It should be good. Hi everyone, my name is Jefferson. I'm the Senior Technical Support from the Jinlong SolarJuice company. And today I'm going to present our brand and some information about our companies and our products. Hope you can find some interesting information here. So today's content will have 4 parts. First, it will be our company profile. Second will be our products. Then the challenge we have in also for the as a manufacturer side, what's a challenge in the market right now, and our technology for the solution. And the last part, it will be introduce the reliability of our products. First will be our company profile. So who we are. We have a long history. Our company established in 2005. We are one of the most experienced and the largest manufacturer of the solar inverter. In 2009, we have completed new PV inverter production facilities that including entire industry chain. And we have, in 2012, we have developed a joint academic workstation at Shanghai Jiao Tong University. And the good news, in 2015, we have our equipment installed at the Eiffel Tower. From 2016 to 2021, we have awarded for 6 consecutive years for the EUPD, the PV inverter. And we are the first public traded company with primary focus on the string inverter in 2019. And this year in 2021, our second production base will put into operation. And our company profile, we have over $293 million as a total asset. We have over 1,500 global employees and over 300 engineers in the R&D, the technical support, different departments to make sure we can provide the best and the quality product to you. And we have 0 bank debt for our financial report. Based on the 2020 annual result, the sales expect to increase up to $340 million USD. It's compared to before, it's a 93% growth, and the profit is up to $55 million, and which is almost 200% growth. And as I mentioned before, our second manufacturing base will be put into operation in this year. This is cover an area over 100,000 square meters. This is some photos about our second manufacturing base. Okay, so this is we have a long history about our company. So what can we bring to the market? We have a 4 series string inverter from 700 watts to 255 kilowatts. Start with the single phase. We have from 700 watts to 3.6 kilowatts as the mini series, which have a single MPPTs. For the 2 MPPTs, we have from 2.5 to 6 kilowatts. And for the 2 MPPT, but can have 3 strings allowance inverter, we have from 7 to 8. And from 9 to 10, it will have 3 MPPTs. Our 3-phase inverter is from 3 kilowatts to the 255 kilowatts. With each series will have some unique features like a lower start-up voltage and the more MPPTs. This can bring more flexible for the system design and can fit more scenarios for the system. We also have our energy storage inverter. We have 3 kilowatts single AC coupled, 3 to 6 low voltage single phase hybrid inverter, 5 to 10 as a high voltage single phase hybrid inverter, and 5 to 10 and 3-phase high voltage hybrid inverters. And also for the smart energy production line, of course, everything is going to go to smart now. And we have our data logger sticker and the data logging box can bring our inverter to online for the remote monitoring and the remote access. And we have the export power manager can achieve the export limitation for all kind of scenarios. So for like a multi-inverter at one site and need to achieve a specific number or or just like something like that. And we have our own power station and monitoring web platform, the apps. So it's very easy to do the monitoring. And here is some case study about our SolarJuice inverters. First one is 1 megawatts installed in the Monash. It used our SolarJuice 50 kilowatts high voltage inverter. So, and here is 100 kilowatts installed at Sydney, I think Diesel House, which use our SolarJuice 50K inverter with and it's a normal version. And in New South Wales, we have another 80 kilowatt installed with our SolarJuice 33 kilowatts inverter. And we also installed 100 kilowatts at one of the IJ supermarket. It uses our SolarJuice 25 kilowatts inverter. And here is a more photo case study. And of course, we have more. As I mentioned, we even install our equipment at the top of the Eiffel Tower. So, and if you are interested, you can ask us, our marketing guy, we can help you to assist. So next part will be the challenge we face this year and our technology and the solid solution for can be solved for it. First is, as I think everyone knows, we have a bigger panel. Because the first panel invite is in 1983, which is only 48 watts with the wafer size is very small. The dimension of the cell is 100 square millimeter. Then in 1996, we have the 125 square millimeter square. Then from 2006, we have the 158 millimeters wafer size. And this is the first time the term M0 wafer size has been defined. Then 10 years later, we have the M2, which just like have slightly bigger than the M0, but it can, without changing the panel size, the output can increase more than 5 watts. Then in 2019, we have M3 and M4, which is mainly used for N-type bifacial module. And this year, we will have the 100 millimeters M10 wafer and 210 millimeters wafer in the market. So bigger panel means they have the bigger current. So bigger current, so system design will be harder. So, but the good news, we have some new technology. We have the bigger checking current. We have the SolarJuice single-phase inverter with 14 amps checking current. For our hybrid inverter will be 15 amps as the checking current, and the three-phase was 16 amp and checking current per string. So it will be compatible most of the panel in the market, and they can be design flexible. And the second one will be the challenge will be the DC arc fault. This is a typical commercial project on rooftop system, facility, lab, office, and other high-value assets are often right below the PV system. So the potential fire risk will not just affect the solar system, and it also can be leads to some further damage or cost. So higher DC voltage of PV system plus a number of the DC connection plus any damage, loss, corporate parts will be cause fire. So this is very dangerous. So our solution will be, we have the arc fault, the circle interrupter. This can be detected DC arc fault here and timely stop inverter generation effect to cut off the current across the string. So this can be, it protects not just your PV system, also your buildings. The main issue is the fire alarm is we have a less than 0.1% false alarm over our installation. And this is our optional for fourth generation and fifth generation series. And if you are interested, always welcome to give us a call. And also changing the hybrid inverter market. Electricity price has risen in most part of the world. I think this is also the main reason why solar industry get more popular right now. And also, but it's also we have a natural disaster such as flood blaze, and also just like currently then seeing they have the water on the floor, this kind of thing. So grid is going down, so no power for the household. And also according to the latest report, and there is still a lot of people around the world that didn't have the 100% power supply. So let me introduce our hybrid inverters. As I mentioned, we have this hybrid inverter is already in the market, and all our inverter have the UPS function. Is 20 millimeters reaction time from normal mode to backup mode, as far as possible to even sometimes the end user even don't notice. And our inverter have a, I think you guys notice our inverter have the screen display. And for our single phase hybrid one have a 7-inch LCD color screen monitoring. You can much easier to read the power goes through, it's go to the battery or go to the house load or to the grid. And the mode switching, we have the multiple mode operation mode to maximize the self-consumption. It can increase the benefit. And our single phase have 5 kilowatts inverter have 5 kilowatts backup power as well. You can support more necessary loads. And compared to the market, our inverter, hybrid inverter is the best option for the customer who want to try energy storage product, but have the price concerns. Also, I need to mention our battery has huge battery compatible list. It's compatible all major popular brands in the Australian market like BYD, LG Chem, and more. And the support and our battery inverter also supports the lead carbon and lead acid battery as well. But we need it to be require some further work for the engineer, our engineer. And also this year we will have the SA Power Network Smart Home schedule. It mainly has 3 parts for the inverter. First will be the remote disconnection and the reconnection. This is the new technology that just require the system can be able to remotely disconnect or reconnect by the approved agent from the SAPN to just like to do it. Our approved agent is the SAPN as well. So yeah, and for the low voltage rise through, this is just like for the system can reduce impact during the disturbance. It's like when the voltage go high or low, something like that. Or our module has approved, it's on the list right now. And the last one will be the dynamic export limitation. This is just like the standard. Our system need to be capable for the export limitation to provide fair sharing of the network capacity. This standard will come effect in 1st of July. Currently, we have already contacted the agent for details and contact the API connection, and we can make sure our product will meet the requirement by the day. Also, the last thing, the most changes is a new AS4777. It have a lot of new changes, standard focus function, which can protect the grid better and let the inverter performance better. A lot of things changed, like the power quality response mode, the voltage and frequency limit, and also increase some new things like isolation of the energy source inside of the inverter or the generation control function. And the good news, we have the whole team working on this, and we can make sure our inverter can be certified in the middle of this year. So that's all. I think it's also a challenge for us. And last part will be I think is I want to tell the reliability of our inverter. So I think after the installation, the most thing is we need to make sure the inverter is working. Our third-party variation reliability, the pack, we have less than 0.2% failure rate report in the lab, and we guarantee 100% of our inverter procedure during the test before the shipment, so it will reduce the failure during the installation. And we are the only company in China to receive the EUPD Research Award for the inverter for 6 years from 2016 to 2021. And in 2019, we have an award at PV inverter for the commercial use for 20 kilowatts. And 2020, we have the same award for 50 kilowatts. So here is some photos about our manufacturing ability, about our manufacturing base. You can see from the photo, everyone is wearing a hat, everyone has a clothes, so we can make sure our manufacturer line has no dust. It's very clean and it's good. And we use the reliability of the components. We have all our components around the world, and in Germany, USA, Japan, and we guarantee all our inverters. We use a specially MC4 connectors as a DC connector. And as I mentioned, we are top range lifespan protection in the PV system. We have our inverter tested in the DNV-GL. And the inverter, we have a long life. In the inverter module present, we are positive impact have a long and impact checking record of PV inverter, which is more than 25 years back. So thanks everyone. Oh, sorry, I forgot this. If you got any questions, you can contact us. We have a branch in Australia, in Melbourne, and we have the warehouse and the technical team, warranty service team is there as well. And if you got any questions, don't hesitate, give us a call or send us an email. And here is our contact numbers and email address. And if you missed that, we also have provided our online warranty inquiry form on our website. So give us a call if you are interested in our product. Okay, thanks everyone for today's attending, and that's all for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Jefferson, for the presentation. And on behalf of EUPD Research, obviously, congratulations on once again qualifying for the Top Brand PV Seal. So unfortunately, that's all we have for today. But looking back at all the presentations, I think it was highly insightful and information-packed. So thank you to all of our speakers for today, starting with Davide and Warwick, Giles and Nigel, Rami, and last but not least, Jefferson. And thank you to everyone attending and participating today. Please keep in mind, you can download all presentations of today at the Solar and Storage DigiCon booths from Ibiza and Joint Forces, and you can reach out to all the speakers individually. Please check out our website to get information on our upcoming live days. And last but not least, thank you to all my colleagues at Joint Forces for Solar, at Ibiza, and obviously my team at EUPD Research. Stay in touch, let us know if you have any questions, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much and stay healthy.